Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. I can't believe
that. Good time of day, wherever you are listening, whenever you are listening. This is episode number 201 of Americans Watching the Footy. We are recapping round 23 of the 2024 season. I'm Ethan Castle, coming to you from South San Francisco, California.
I am Benjamin Castle, coming to you from, about a meter away from him?
And Brian Harambe's here too.
Yep, right between us.
I guess we'll open this episode with some
news, everyone!
I think out of necessity, that's the case. So, looks like Shea Bolton has indeed requested a trade. Or has he? Looks like it's mostly semantics. I am on John Ralph's side with this one, just saying he wants it, but he gets that the terms can be difficult. Given that he's got, 3 more years on his contract, I can completely understand that.
More importantly, at least to me, and I think to both of us, is that Ben Brown has announced that he will be retiring at the end of this season, which is after this week. He is especially significant to us because he is the second player we ever became familiar with.
And the first one is now also retired. Brown kicked 60 goals in 3 straight seasons for North between 2017 and 19, never an All-Australian. And then got his chances later in 2021 with Melbourne and took full advantage of that. I think he kicked goals in each of their 9 final games en route to the flag.
Funny, he only had 1 goal in that win over St. Kilda in round 1 in 2020. It feels like, I don't know, he was definitely the one that stood out.
Well, just big dude, long hair, recognizable, and if it was a set shot goal, that we were very quickly introduced to his trademark.
Now, the prior day didn't even kick a goal, just had 11 disposals and an assist.
We recognized the players with long hair, I think.
I think it was just obvious distinguishing physical features. Also, some of these 2020 games had players that I literally had never heard of before this. And by this, I mean looking at the box score right now. So that's kind of cool.
The other thing I randomly remember is that Sam Sturt, I think, kicked 3 goals in that Essendon Freo game in 2020 on debut.
I know he was a rising star.
Rising star for this week, by the way, about damn time, Calciadeer.
There was a case for Joel Frazier. We'll get into all of that. I know the drill by now, or maybe you're new to listening to us, in which case, welcome.
We're going to go through each game in order of bounce time, and I guess in order of conclusion? Or no, not in order of conclusion.
Just in order of how they were listed on the schedule, with the couple that were running concurrently, but one that wasn't running concurrently because it was the Friday night game. Essendon 8-11-59, defeated by Sydney 15-8-98. We can officially say goodbye to any slim hopes the Bombers had of playing finals this year. Considering that they didn't have Chad Warner, I thought this was a pretty convincing performance for Sydney, and I am all of a sudden much more confident in them winning the whole thing. Even though they trailed 30-23 at halftime, broke out with a 38-10 third quarter, and then 37-19 in the fourth to put it away.
It's just the difficulty with the typical slow start for no clear reason that still worries me, even though Longmire is an excellent halftime adjuster. You just can't afford that sort of slow start against teams of higher quality. We've seen that a number of times this year, especially, of course, within the past 2 months.
That they didn't get down by more than 2 goals was obviously significant.
I did, though, like how the Swans operated. Really, their plan and their recipe for success is simple. It starts with getting Isaac Heaney involved. It's really not rocket science. From there, when Chad Warner's available, he's one of the second guys up. Otherwise, in games like this, it's more of Luke Parker's responsibility along with James Rowbottom. And Parker had 3 goals. It was a big part of just the team finding their footing, just that extra kind of level of class and maturity that Essendon didn't have. And then from there, if you're looking further back and usually on the outside, Braden Campbell, Ollie Florence, and Errol Goulden all had excellent second halves in terms of kicking. And really, from the second quarter onward, Goulden had some shaky kicks early, just trying to slap things out of defense, and that wasn't working. That's also not where he works best.
I thought he was actually really good in the second half, and I think you could still make a case for him being best on ground. I just loved that he attacked from a bunch of different angles instead of just kicking from one particular lane.
When he has the time to kick smartly, he's excellent. He just needs to be better in those immediate sort of instinctual circumstances. And Ollie Florence the right type to be kicking from the back anyway, and Florence got plenty of that action. Once they got Goulden more into center wing and half forward and some inside opportunities as well, that was where he thrived, and that's where he's always thrived. And then Braden Campbell had probably the best game of his career. He's normally a defender, but could definitely take his strong kicking downfield, really strong left-footed kick. I thought, a couple weeks ago, he was an obvious candidate to get dropped, and I was surprised that he had only been dropped for one game. Didn't put up an especially convincing performance the following week, but looked really good in this one. Like you said, best game of his career so far. And I was just super impressed with Ollie Florent, who I think I've kind of always just lumped him in with Goulden in terms of like ball mover, high possession. No, very different player, especially in terms of where he's started. Of course, I think more flexible in terms of the full ground than Goulden is.
I loved the sweeping work he did in the back. He was very clean at ground level. I thought it was his best game of the year as well. So what's really scary is if you get Chad Warner back in there doing Chad Warner things, then this is like a fully operational death machine.
And you can keep moving Florent and Campbell and Goulden a bit further downfield also if Callum Mills is going to stay in defense and if he can work back up to top form. And he's got another couple weeks to find his footing before finals. Of course, he got their game this week at home against the Crows. I would manage a lot of guys for that, including Will Hayward, who has been playing hurt the past month and has still been playing quite well. But I think getting Mills more game time at this point would honestly be better. So it was Braden Campbell's second multi-goal game. And yeah, just keep giving him license to push up. Maybe start him and Goulden opposite each other on center wing.
I am not obviously as confident in the Swans as I was, say, after round, 10 to 12 or something.
I mean, who is?
But I am definitely feeling way better about them than I did just a couple of weeks ago. And I don't think that's a knee-jerk reaction. I just think they look so much more like themselves.
Rowbottom getting back up to speed is a huge part of that. Properly using Goulden really shows in terms of the quality of entries in the second half. Goulden was a big part of that. The Swans had 3 goals from 18 inside 50s in the first half, 12 from 30 entries in the second. This essentially locks up the minor premiership to the surprise of absolutely nobody. And also to the surprise of absolutely nobody, Essendon just couldn't tread water in the third quarter. Again, that was 6-1 they've had. As persistent a problem with third quarters as Sydney has with first. Essendon have lost now 5 of the past 6 third quarters. Sam Draper went cold there, and Brody Grundy started beating him in the ruck, and he lost some of his forward impact, Draper, and it really snowballed from there. On the forward front for Sydney, I was pleased that Joel Amartey got a chance to work through things, that he wasn't the one to be subbed off. He had 2 goals in the fourth quarter, and they really got around him for that. That was just his second multi-goal game since he bagged 9 in round 14 in Adelaide. And another player that I want to mention in the forward half is playing as a high half forward is Caden Cleary. Easily his best game yet. 11 touches, but 7 score involvements off that. A goal behind and 2 assists. You know how Essendon had that 8-game stand in Victoria from round 16?
Yeah.
2-6.
And it's not like they were facing a lot of great teams during that stretch. You thought, with their schedule and with the position they had put themselves in, that they would be a finalist. Did I expect them to win a final? No. With things like that, when teams have long droughts, I'll believe it when I see it. And the funniest part is, it was 10 games going back to before the bye even, But after the fourth of those games, when they beat Collingwood, you're feeling pretty good. And then the Melbourne loss happens, and then the Crows loss happens, and then the Saints loss is when they really got their pants pulled down. And yeah, the Freo win was great, but they still weren't even in great position after that. And then the Suns game, which was like comedy for anyone that's not an Essendon fan, or I don't know if anyone really hates the Gold Coast Suns. It would be really funny if someone did, and like that game would have been just like the worst thing to ever happen to them. But I mean, if you hate the Gold Coast Suns, you're generally having a pretty good time.
Yeah, so I guess 3-7 in that 10-game stretch where they didn't have to leave Victoria. And again, like 2 of those were really good wins. I mean, the Freo one, that fourth quarter reflected pretty well on them, especially with how Zach Merritt and Dylan Shield just took that over. And they were probably Essendon's best in this one.
I have liked Dylan Shield as the season has wrapped up. He has gotten into shape and played really well. And it's unfortunate that it's come when all these other things have declined, you know, between Archie Perkins having such a great start to the season and then cooling off. Sam Durham's still been all right, but another one who's cooled off.
I mean, it's been Jai Caldwell who's been carrying more of that inside burden as the year's gone on. I've liked, though, how they used Durham this year, how they've used Harry Jones.
I think we can kill the Zach Merritt All-Australian captain conversation for the year. Does it just end up being Patrick Cripps? I assume it does.
Cripps All-Australian captain and Brownlow?
Very possible. I mean, I don't know. Who do you have as All-Australian captain? Maybe it could be Heaney?
There's an argument. I mean, it doesn't have to be a captain. I mean, Tom Hawkins was All-Australian captain 2 years ago. I know I'm not alone in this frustration because many Essendon fans and non-Essendon fans as well are in the same boat. Fucking play Dyson Heppel. Last game in Victoria, over 250 games for the club, a leader during difficult periods. And more than that, just like, I don't think playing him would have been enough of a downgrade. Honestly, what was the plan at halfback in the first place? Was having this talk with Coach Johnny Hess and puzzled us that the announcers thought that it was a good thing that he wasn't playing. Maybe sometimes it would appear that giving somebody a game like that would be soft. No, you're pretty much out of finals already. You're going up against the minor premiers, and you really don't have any strong, truly defensive halfbacks in that mix. I believe the halfback line was Martin, Redmond, and McGrath. Martin's not properly in the right position at halfback anyways, better as a wing and half forward. Redmond and McGrath are much more ball movers. Could have used more of an interceptor and just a steadier guy in there like Heppel. Sam Wiedemann didn't cut it one-on-one. You could also justify, hey, getting Heppel in there. Maybe the guys will get up and pound him. I mean, didn't work for another guy this week.
Yeah, but it's worth a shot. It's not like, even though Heppel had definitely look, he's at the end of his career for a reason. It would have been cool if he had gotten that shot, especially considering it's not like he would have needed to leave anything in the tank.
Now watch him play at the Gabba.
On one hand, that would be good. On the other, it would be really frustrating.
Which is why I see it happening. Essendon.
One last thing here. Some teams have made multi-ruck situations work, as we'll be talking about very soon. Essendon's situation right now between Draper and Nick Bryan seem really weird because both of them played pretty well at times, then they subbed Bryan out.
I mean, it seems like a plan for them a lot right now. I don't think it's all that great for Bryan's development.
I just don't think they have any sort of plan with it.
In terms of plan, we have no plan.
Exactly. They don't have a strategy to play the hot hand. They don't have a strategy for when both are working.
Were they thinking that Todd Goldstein would have a more solid year?
I don't think so. I think they knew that they were getting an older player towards the end that they wanted for, leadership and stuff and depth.
I mean, I would like for him to transition into a ruck coach at the club. That could be a nice way to send him off, and I guess he'll go around again unless we hear something within this next week. But yeah, I find Bryan's role frustrating right now, and I like them exercising Draper's forward talent, but there's a lot being lost there still. Gold Coast Suns, 9-9-63, defeated by Melbourne, 18-9-117. That is the Suns' second home loss of the year, so everything has gone bass-ackwards for them now.
I just learned Jack Viney was fined $10,000. Now, it could reduce it to $6,250 with an early plea, but that puts him at the top of the list of fines this year because it's his third rough conduct fine. As much as Zach Butters has done, he's barely been fined $3,000 this year. Jack Viney in like that one just kind of dropped the hammer on it. Rough conduct against Matt Rowell in the first quarter.
Yeah, sounds right. Viney was working through Rowell and company really well in this whole game. He seemed like an easy best on ground. As Melbourne took advantage from center bounces, Viney kept winning at the source and then getting forward from stoppage, and that is exactly how he should be playing all along, especially in the absence of Christian Petrarca and Clayton Oliver. I mean, should have been happening even before either of those two were out. Could have kind of rotated the guys through that role. And then the younger ranks forward really showed up for Melbourne. Daniel Turner had his first 4-goal game. I think he's established himself as a legitimate forward for the future. Jacob Van Rooyen and Harrison Petty with 3 each. That's 10 goals out of a pretty young forward group. This was Petty's most fluid game as a forward. I was saying earlier in the game, maybe you could just keep him over there as a defensive forward option. If he can find some greater consistency, though, then yeah, keep him up front and let him use his defensive background just in key one-on-one situations. It does leave the back ranks a bit thin at the key position, so I would imagine that will be a draft target for them. And I think that would have been even without this whole Petty predicament, and that's unintentional alliteration. On the outside also, Ed Langdon had an easy time. Not really much opposition from Sam Closey or really anyone. And then the Suns didn't do a great job in terms of setting themselves up. They were kind of doing a Melbourne, honestly.
Just bombing it in?
Yeah, just long and high kicks when they didn't have the forward numbers. Tom McDonald was able to float in and take some easy intercepts.
I mean, Jed Walter can only injure so many people.
I like how that's your first thought. And also, of course, Max Gawn was working back into defense. He did that all game. Just a further necessity with Stephen May out. Even though this game was within a goal at halftime, Melbourne breaking out felt inevitable, and then it finally happened in the fourth, 7-1. Honestly, don't think I learned all that much through this game because I already had my thoughts about Daniel Turner staying forward, and it was just nice to see some things click for Melbourne, and I think they kind of spooked Sam Collins early on. He got beaten in the front a couple times, then kept trying to play back shoulder, and that didn't work either. Sam Collins just doesn't have any mad games, and this was one of his poor performances of the year. And in the year where Charlie Ballard has taken a real step back, the Suns will crumble if Collins isn't effective.
I'll be watching this game in the next couple days. We'll be all caught up in time to record America's Brownlow, which, by the way, we're going to be recording like a day or so after the home and away season ends.
But we'll release it a day after the actual Brownlow count in all likelihood.
Yes, that is the plan. It would be really fun then to compare our votes to the actual ones. That it also gives us time to edit things.
Yeah, so mark that on your calendar for Grand Final Tuesday. What questions do you have?
Not really any. I'm just going to go into this game and I guess have an open mind.
I mean, I guess that's the way to do it. Tuke Miller was back in.
Oh, I had thought earlier tonight, just to myself, like, what's going to happen to Tuke Miller?
He was back in for the first time in 6 weeks. He was kept on a wing role and got some of the ball. Didn't do anything too crazy, though. Was clearly, third in importance, fourth in importance in the middle because it was Rowell and Flanders and then Anderson. I think Flanders may have been the best for Gold Coast in this game. He got a lot of the ball early and was the driving force behind most of Gold Coast's success, especially in the first half. I was hoping for big stuff out of Mac Andrew, especially against the team that should have had him, and it didn't really happen. Nothing really happened for the Suns. It feels weird saying that, even though they kicked 4 goals in the second. It just felt like underwhelming, not learning much SOS. I was irked that Jake Melksham was the sub again. Didn't matter. Melksham is out of contract after this year and is probably toward the end of his career just in terms of his age. Haven't heard anything about a new deal. I hope he does go around again. And I hope that Simon Goodwin and company realize his importance. Definitely teach some of these newer forwards a thing or two about playing a bit defensively, especially on the smaller side. Otherwise, Kazi Pickett, quiet first half, definitely responded in the second. He helped get the first goal, the fourth, which was Melksham's, and the Demons just had better endurance despite the Suns usually playing in much worse conditions.
What was the weather like for this game? It looked nice from the couple of clips I saw.
Hot. The answer is hot. Like, how hot? I mean, I think it was in the 80s for a good bit of the game.
And you would assume pretty humid then.
I mean, it's the Gold Coast. To add to one last thing regarding the Suns, Jack Lukosius went off in the VFL. Is he doing that to prove something to Hardwick? To prove something to the South Australian suitors? Question mark. I know the Suns don't have as big of an academy crop this year. Really, it's Leo Lombard to watch out for. So maybe they can be more flexible trade-wise. And, of course, we do expect them to have to make somewhat of a splash for Daniel Rioli. Greater Western Sydney Giants, 15-11-101, defeating Fremantle 14-8-92. Jesse Hogan pretty much secures the Coleman medal.
I mean, he already probably had.
There's always potential for a freak bag in the last week to totally upset things, but started accurately, finished with 6-4.
It's funny, they had been saying how he had only had 3 behinds in like his prior 8 games, and then he had 4 here, but he ended up getting his act together. The real story here was Brent Daniels doing literally everything. I mean, I know there's like some cherry picking, very specific stats here, but courtesy of Sir Swamp Thing, players with 25 disposals, 13 tackles, and 3 goals in AFL games. Gary Ablett, 2011, Gary Ablett, 2015, Brent Daniels, 2024. And what makes this even better, Gary Ablett Jr. did it against Freo and GWS. Daniels did it for GWS against Freo. I would be, maybe 6 goals does it for Hogan, but I think you got to give the 3 votes to Daniels.
Brent Daniels was kind of erased from a lot of people's footy conscience when he missed all of 2022 and has been integral to pretty much all of the Giants' success since coming back. 3-1, 29 disposals, 13 tackles, 11 score involvement, 7 clearances, 7 marks, 2 assists. That wasn't the only thing that went well, though. Steven Canelio was back. He had 7 clearances. Also, he was wearing long sleeves. Lockie Whitfield with another 27 disposals, and normally I've said he's just racking up stuff in the back, whatever. No, this game he was more active. I think that's something that started last week late against the Lions because he went to somewhat of a high half-forward job there, and that worked. I mean, he's a good distributor, so if you have some more people who can work from the back, if Himmelberg can take on some more responsibilities there, Iden with the kicking, then slide Whitfield around to just whatever parts of the ground need to be cleaner. In this case, it was much more of a middle job.
They got him involved in the middle. He was getting a couple of tough ground balls, and I think it really just changed their offense as a whole for the better. Andrew Brayshaw was kind of on his own for Freo at times. He ended up with 41 disposals, 9 clearances, and 33 pressure acts.
Oh, 40? Sorry. He gets the 3 votes.
I would not include him in my votes. He is the clear polished turd for this game, I think, though Caleb Sarong did have 2 goals off of his 24 disposals and 10 clearances, but I think this game was just largely played on the Giants' terms. Freo didn't have too many opportunities to, slow him down, control possession from the back. It was a fun watch. Good back and forth most of the way.
I mean, Freo can play at a faster pace. They just don't like to, and that's part of what's so aggravating about the Dockers, really since we started watching. It's that Longmire keeps this defensive-minded sort of Simpson-esque attitude even when they show that they can play at speed and just bring a lot of force from the middle. And there's a lot of frustration around how Longmire's really coached things in terms of player movement and substitution. Seemed to be a poor decision to bring on Nathan O'Driscoll so late and for Nat Fife.
Well, I thought Fife was having a pretty good game. Either you could have taken out an actual defender.
I'm not sure about that because you're still trying to put up some resistance, obviously, that tight of a game. And O'Driscoll doesn't have as much defensive acumen. I would have taken out Bailey Banfield, who just was not having a good day. And that's the type of game that could really jeopardize a contract.
He did end up with a couple of assists, but had a couple of pretty bad giveaways and then got called for the 50 against Hogan that all but ended the game. Put the Giants up 9 with 2.5 left. Does it get called every time? No, but it gets called most of the time. I wasn't bothered. Yeah, I wasn't especially bothered by it. But yeah, this was a fun watch. Giants had the first 3 goals. Frio came back, got up by 15. GWS then retook the lead in the third and held it the rest of the way, but not without some challenges. Just a fun, good flow to this game. And it was a good-looking game. One of those very rare occasions you get to actually see Frio rock the purple on the road. And against the Giants orange, it looked fantastic, which is funny because, like, orange versus purple, you wouldn't think of as like, oh yeah, that's a good matchup. But visually, this game was fucking awesome. I think this was one of the best-looking games of the year.
I'm thinking of other times where Frio would actually wear purple on the road, and I'm struggling to come up with it. Maybe if Hawthorn go with an all-gold look?
I don't know, but I liked this.
Yeah, there's just not much room for it with so many teams with varying shades of red and blue.
Also, Darcy Jones with a goal and 7 tackles. Like I've said, Darcy Jones is what old people would call the straw that stirs the drink. I call him the make shit happener. Sam Taylor definitely did a pretty good job against Frio's forwards in general. Jai Amos was a little bit limited because of him.
I mean, he was also limited because he didn't have as much help down there. No Josh Tracy.
It's too bad. I would have loved to see a Taylor versus Tracy matchup. But look, they still scored 92 without him. It's not like the Doggers played poorly. Really, in this 3-game stretch, I don't think they've really played that poorly. I think the only game you really look at this year of like, yeah, they really shit the bed was the first meeting with the Eagles. And I mean, because like even the blowout loss to the Swans, like it was everything except for the actual kicking at goal that was pretty good. Other things that came to my attention in this game, Brennan Cox is not a very good one-on-one defender. He's good at moving the ball out of the back, but when he got put into 1v1s, he really struggled with Hogan. That's another one where, you know, they miss Alex Pierce. You'd love to have him for that. Could have just let him wait one more week and gotten him back in. And I mean, to be fair, the odds of him re-injuring that same arm probably weren't that high, but it was still stupid.
That's just another thing there in terms of personnel and player management and in-game stuff that will really get scrutinized here. And I think Longmire does get another go-around because
I think he should.
Because of how the chips have fallen in terms of injuries. Frio, though, are 1-6-1 now in games decided by 13 points or fewer this season.
There are some that are just like tough breaks. Like I look at the Carlton and Port losses in back-to-back weeks.
The Carlton one stands out the most, especially because of right now that being the difference between places 8 and 9.
But I am not eulogizing this team's season yet. They need one of 3 games to go their way, one of which I think you can easily rank them in order of likelihood. The most likely being a Dogs loss to GWS, followed by a Carlton loss to the Saints, and then bringing up the rear a Hawthorn loss to North. Just get one of those 3, and
the door open.
Yeah. Or even, in theory, a Lions home loss to Essendon.
Don't bet on that. Yeah, you'd have to make up about 8% between those 2 games. That is easily the least likely of outcomes, but might honestly be the most satisfying for Dockers supporters because Lockie Neal.
Oh no, I think the most satisfying would be a Carlton loss, just within the realm of this season.
Well, with the Saints having won 5 of 7, I'm not going to count them out by any means to do that. And there's just still so much curiosity in terms of the current state of the Blues, in terms of injuries. So many were listed as 1 to 2 week outs. So yeah, this team's season is not over, but this is disappointing. And again, I was surprised that they kept trying Brennan Cox in some of those situations. O'Driscoll did look good when he got in, which was really satisfying, and I liked him in the middle, even though a full-time solution is him on one wing, Jeremy Sharp on the other. But that you could throw either of them into the middle in a pinch is really good. Particularly O'Driscoll, I'd say, over Sharp in the middle.
But you know how I said Essendon have really struggled with their ruck situation? GWS made it work alternating between Kieran Briggs and Lockie Keefe.
I was really surprised that they kept Keefe in. I mean, I guess that they did. It worked. Obviously, with Briggs still somewhat nursing that shoulder issue, it helped give him a spell. Not sure if that's the plan going into finals or if you want a bit more of a defensive forward look.
Maybe you do it more matchup based or see how Keefe does this week against the Bulldogs and work from there. But I like the combination of the two, which I didn't think I would.
I'm surprised especially that he was kept in against a team that was without their top ruck and was debuting another Liam Reedy.
Toby Bedford was on Caleb Sarong. That was like such an obvious call, and Sarong did kind of work his way around it as the game went on, but I love that Bedford still ended up with 10 disposals, an octopus, 2 assists, and a game-high 35 pressure acts.
It's funny, we're talking about Bedford and Daniels in such a different way to last year, and yet they're the two pieces around whom so much of the success has revolved. Really, it's been Bedford, Daniels, and another small each of the past 2 years. It was them running through and all the flanks, setting things up for Toby Green to do whatever the fuck he wanted last year. This year, Toby's been much quieter, but Bedford being a tagger, Daniels getting more involved in the middle, and then the third small being Darcy Jones in his helmet. That's what's helped things click for the Giants. And then, obviously, Jesse Hogan in career form in his late 20s.
Collingwood 11-13-79, defeating Brisbane 11-12-78. Thanks, Collingwood.
Collingwood did a Collingwood, and in the process, helped lock the Giants into the top 4 along with the Swans. New South Wales runs the AFL, and also gave Geelong a finals berth and a good shot at the top 4. Really helped close to lock in the top 4. Now, in the fourth quarter of this game, our dad texted us saying, "The champion is dead. Our dad is a fool."
Now, I said they already were. Look at who the teams in front of them have left, and I am still correct. Although there is still a window for Collingwood to make finals. That involves them winning and one of Carlton or Hawthorn losing and Freo losing, and the margin in those Collingwood and either Hawthorn or Carlton games adding up to be somewhere around 200 points, which, like, it's not going to happen. But if any team would do something this ridiculous, it would be them. It's not going to happen.
I am very happy that Lachie Schultz finally seized the moment in the fourth quarter. And, of course, with the winning goal, Ethan's man's.
Beau McCreary.
Beau McCreary is the most Collingwood player as of now.
I just really like the high-pressure forward, and he plays that role so well.
And Schultz can do that too. And Schultz did that this game and actually got some kicking reward for it late.
I gotta say, though, Schultz with his goal that cut it to 5, Anthony Hudson called him Schilt at least 5 times in that 30-second span, and that's too bad because it was a good goal and a key moment. It was all just very Collingwood, and all I can think of is like, dude, that's not how you say that. That's not what that is.
It's how Lachie pronounced it as well. Maybe it's just an Australian thing. I have no idea, but it ain't right.
I've got to go back and watch this game mostly for vote purposes because, honestly, the Brownlow predictor currently shows Patrick Cripps in front, but this game could be huge for Brownlow implications between Nick Dacos and Lachie Neale.
And then a bunch of other good candidates as well. I think the biggest conclusions out of this game, in terms of just individual things, the Lions don't really have anybody who can tag beyond Jared Berry, and Berry was ruled out at quarter time after suffering some hamstring tightness. No Berry meant Nick Dacos could run much more freely, impacted the game instantly in the second quarter, and did that in the clutch in the fourth as well. 2-1 from 25 and 9 score involvements, and the timing of his best patches of play could get him into the 3-vote conversation. I think it was a more complete game for his brother as well, which has not been happening as much this year. I think is a real reason why Collingwood had struggled to regain that sort of premiership caliber all around. The other big individual conclusion, this was the most Joe Danaher game.
I'm going to have fun calculating things through participation medal data and trying to decide if he was actually good or not.
You're basically just counting all the ticks and crosses for all the important players, right?
Pretty much, yeah, except I call them pluses and minuses because, you know, I don't use the metric system.
Well, maybe the umpires don't either because Nick Dacos definitely ran too far before one of his goals.
Here's the thing, though.
Put that through the lab.
He averaged about a bounce every 15 meters. It's just that, like, he ran about 22 or 23 before the first bounce and then no more than 7 or 8 for the second. You can't do it after the fact. I think you got to do it before. Like, if you just bounce 5 times at the very start, you could go and run 75 meters. I think that's how it should be, you know? Like, with each bounce, you get to, like, store it up, turn Adam Sod into the greatest player ever. Pretty much. Wait, never mind. He'd pull his hamstring. Max Holmes could have some fun with that, too. He's a pretty active bouncer.
Do you think Max Gawn would exercise that rule?
No.
By the way, he did sign another contract extension.
I thought Oscar McInerney was really good in this game, although Darcy Cameron did settle in as well. John Noble, 3 assists. Another big defensive game for Jeremy Howe. I know a couple weeks ago against Carleton, he got a ton of praise. It's funny, I went back and watched that game closely, and I didn't see it. I saw it much more in this game. Only 6 intercept marks.
The spoiling on point again, though. That's been the bigger thing for him all year.
Felt like he had more than 3 spoils.
Definitely felt like that. And obviously, Darcy Moore has been in much better form over the past month or so. Meanwhile, in the other 50, Will Hoskin-Elliott on Harris Andrews. Yeah, that worked. Didn't actually need Billy Frampton to do the job, and we're able to get a smaller player on it. Collingwood has multiple defensive forward options, and if Hoskin-Elliott can keep that up, then maybe you could swing Frampton back and get a bit of a boost in terms of tall defense. I think this was a nice game for Will Parker to get an opportunity, but definitely not a best 23 player yet. But yeah, Andrews definitely limited, and that allowed Collingwood to succeed more in terms of the entire forward look.
2 straight weeks now, the Lions have not been able to finish games well, and I think that just kind of feeds into what I have been hinting at for a while.
That they're frauds?
No, I don't think they're frauds. I think they're still really, really good. But when you start the season slow, you have to expend a lot of energy to get yourselves back into it.
I don't even think it's that. I think it's just that they're beaten in the ways that we know they could be beaten. You have somebody do a good job against Andrews. You beat them on rebounds. They're good when their defense can get set, but not when they have to go back quickly. And you have a bunch of small pressure players go at it. Schultz, McCreary, Hill in that sense. You can only defend one of them, and it was Starcevich doing his damnedest to keep Bobby Hill out of it. But you can't defend against all of them. Think about the Giants in the same way last week. Starcevich keeping Toby Green quiet. Big Darcy Jones and his helmet have their impact. Seriously, so much of this game and just my thoughts around it go back to Joe Danaher for every reason. 4-2 from 16 and so many other involvements, both good and bad. A couple of his characteristic misses, one that he hooked from right in front, and obviously given the barrister margins by which this game was won, you think back to that a lot. It's just a microcosm of Joe Danaher's career in one game, and it's beautiful for every reason. I think, honestly, my main character pick for him held up somewhat well. Congratulations to Scott Pendlebury on his record-tying 10th one-point win, and congratulations to Collingwood for barely keeping their season alive. Also, do you think Brisbane went to defense mode a bit too early?
I didn't notice them getting into defense mode, so again, maybe I need to just watch this closer.
Up 3 goals with 7 minutes left, it seems right.
No, that totally is the right time.
I think maybe the behind that Jamie Elliott kick could have signaled them, okay, we need to back off that a bit, be a bit more aggressive once it got back within 3 goals.
I didn't notice anything.
I mean, I saw some fans criticizing it. I didn't think of it in particular in the moment. I think it was just them trying to control the game at a bit of a slower pace because that was what was working for them. Collingwood was beating them when they were going faster, especially in terms of rebounds. That's both a Collingwood strength and a Brisbane Lions weakness. Lions got a lot to play for now, given the home field advantage, and we still think that will be a factor come finals.
They could totally lose a final at the Gabba still. I can't see them losing to Essendon. That would be really funny.
Well, a win against Essendon would ensure them home elimination final, I believe.
Yeah, would assure them the 5 seed.
Ready for an opening round rematch? Teams and venue?
Possible.
You know, Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How did you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
You may have heard an ad just now. That's cool. Here's our own. Follow us. Like literally fucking everywhere.
Walk behind us. Give us a few feet, but walk behind us.
In terms of socials, at Americans Footy, pretty much everywhere. We should pop up pretty quickly, all things considered. Individually, Benjamin HK01 is my handle.
Castle Media is mine. Brian is on Instagram at catnamebrian.
And he is currently very fascinated with both his father's computer and his father's fingers. He sighs and gulps and stuff a lot, and it's really cute.
Like, every noise he makes is fantastic.
He never grew out of his kitten voice, really.
Port Adelaide 11-14-80, defeating Adelaide 8-10-58. So, as someone who only was able to watch bits and pieces of this as it was on the big screen in the background, it seemed like a very showdown-y showdown where you had a lot of fighting, a lot of stuff about teeth, which, without having the volume on that, because the Cats were playing at the same time, I didn't get, like, the full context of this whole thing.
I guess you really weren't in the whole news cycle this week. It was early on the week, maybe Monday or Tuesday, that Josh Rochelle said Port supporters don't have much teeth.
I do remember that. I just never put the things together and realized like how big that was.
This rivalry is already covered in gasoline, and so any one little spark can cause everything to ignite, and Rochelle provided that very quickly.
I mean, look, if we're making tiers of like how many teeth fans have, Collingwood and Port are definitely in that bottom tier.
What's next? Like Richmond?
I think so. Richmond and then possibly Essendon.
Carlton fans definitely have the most teeth out of any Big Four club.
Yeah.
Which clubs fans have the most teeth?
Could be Carlton, honestly. Could be the Suns.
Melbourne, that's a very upper class club.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Eagles as well.
Now, Eagles take a more broad... No, Eagles kind of take all kinds. So I think they'd be like the most average smack in the middle.
Eagles and Swans, both, just because they have huge populations. But yeah, this was definitely a very showdown. Competitive the whole way because records do not matter in this matchup at all.
I mean, it seemed like Port pulled away pretty early in the fourth.
Well, they pulled away not because of any record or any real talent gap, I think. It was more a composure gap. And you know what? Actually, it was a talent gap because of who Adelaide lost in game with Dan Houston bumping Isaac Reichen. So he may very well have played his last game for the Power. Will they now show him on the Jumbotron at the Adelaide Oval and give him a standing ovation?
What is that in reference to?
Heaney!
Oh.
Hey, he wears the same number. Maybe it's just a number 5 thing. This was an interesting game. Stoppage heavy as you'd expect. Pressure heavy. Adelaide had the better ground ball gets for a lot of the game. Really the first 3 quarters, first half in particular. But Port were better at clearance. A lot of that came from Jordan Sweet dominating in the ruck. And then Zach Butters, the runaway showdown medal winner off a 42 disposal game.
Was there more to it than just 42 disposals?
I mean, he was the biggest figure in the center. It was really, Rosie was after him and Willem Drew put on a lot of pressure. But in terms of the actual carry out of the center, it was still Butters. And then Horn Francis still had a good midfield and forward split. That's been working. And I think it's been out of necessity for injury that's come about. But Power should really stick with how they're using Horn Francis. Just the split is working. Let him get into some of those center contests, but have him take tough matchups downfield. And Max Michelini is just not able to body up against him. It's nothing against Michelini. It's just Horn Francis is strong. You got to put a stronger defender on him. He can play well above his size, not in terms of vertical ability, but just sheer force. The 42 disposals are cool, and nearly half of them and still being over 60% efficiency is pretty solid. Looks like Ollie Wines also nearly half of his contested, and he got over 70%, but the 10 clearances and 10 score involvements for Butters definitely helped drive the point home. So like I said, the way I usually do my setup is if there's 2 games at once and I'm in charge of the non-US TV game, I put the US TV game on in the background on the TV and then focus in on the laptop. So the TV is kind of just like, it's there in the background. I don't miss if something dramatic happens. Like I missed the Houston bump as it happened. Caught the replays many times. I know some people talk about the idea of having a red card or something, but honestly, I think one of the cool things about footy is that someone can do something like that and then basically like all eyes are on them for the rest of the game and like they're going to get suspended. It's not like this enables more reckless behavior. I think it's just something that's cool and unique to the sport. You can do something really fucking stupid and then have a target on you for the rest of the game, and the cameras are always on you and you become like the main character, win or lose, and then like your opponent has a chance to exact revenge on you right then and there. Or you can exact revenge in terms of just in-game impact, and Houston was what Dan Houston normally was outside of that one incident. I also just don't want to trust the umpires with that sort of responsibility to send them off or cause further delay by having more reviews. One thing that we love the flow of footy compared to other sports, just the constant general intensity of it, and send-offs would definitely disrupt that and also put even more burden on umpires who have to deal with rules constantly being changed anyway. Do I see it happening? I'll give it 50-50. Also, I've said that this is the rivalry that's the closest to a college football rivalry, and just like looking at the facial expressions of the players for Port, as they finally, they're about to get their first win over the Crows in a couple of years, like, and actually do it in the bars. I think that as much as we've liked to talk about how, having the home showdown contributes to the crowd, a showdown win, whether it's technically your home game or not, both have their benefits. You either get to win in front of your fans or win in front of a crowd that's like 90% against you, but like legitimately look at what it means to them type of thing. Because like you can tell just watching this game compared to any other, like this means a fuck ton more. This is easily the best rivalry in footy, better than any Victorian rivalry in terms of meaning. Like, yes, having, a huge Collingwood-Carlton game or Carlton-Essendon or Collingwood-Essendon is awesome, and it's really cool when you've got, 90,000 at the G. I think Cole-Car would be second. Yeah, this is the top rivalry. I fully maintain that. Well, I'm sure, like I said, especially, if you're in Melbourne for any of the big Victorian rivalries, that's awesome. No rivalry consumes a state like this one. And not just that, it's just like, forget all the external noise and just look at the game itself and just like the emotion. Like, this is the closest thing you get to like, a huge soccer rivalry. Are you thinking like the Old Firm or something like that?
Now, I know the Crows, just came in as an expansion club, but like, can you imagine if these two like dominated the Sandful and then played each other? Like what sort of hype would go into that game? It feels like that.
Like how the Port and Norwood rivalry used to be in the Sandful then?
Kinda, yeah.
You could argue that. Now, if you're thinking about what the Crows did to lose this game, other than lose their composure, and they definitely did that. They weren't able to shake off the incident nearly as well. Makes sense with one of their players being concussed.
And not just one of them, maybe their very best and most important.
But yeah, the leaders, I can think Matt Crouch in particular just definitely still rattled him, and he was still busy but less efficient.
He was definitely at the center of a lot of drama, I could tell.
It was nobody's cleanest game, but he really could have moved past the incident, and that weighed down the whole team. But if you think about what Adelaide, you think about pressure, about the younger guys being active in that, about Rochelle putting it on, a couple good kicks and some key moments, but then also not being organized in terms of entering the 50. In the third quarter, they had 9 of the first 11 inside 50s and got 3 points from it. That's just emblematic of the Crows.
So they really could have poured it on because they had the halftime lead.
Yeah, they had a 10-point halftime lead and had a swell of opportunities out of the long break. And instead, there was this 11-point swing after Lockie Gallant's kick ended up short. Gallant didn't take much advantage of his opportunity with Taylor Walker out. And that's unfortunate, especially given his performance of the twos the week prior. I think it leaves him in a very tough spot with his contract. But after Gallant missed his shot, Port went the other way. Charlie Dixon handballs over the top for Darcy Byrne-Jones and Porter within a goal. They get the first goal after the Rankin concussion. And from there, you just knew they'd be home free. A couple soccer goals at close range helped work out the margin. There was a post-goal free kick as well. They didn't score from it, but how often do you see a team win after they give up a post-goal free kick?
I mean, unless it's in like a blowout or if it's super early in a game. Those are the only times I think you can really get away with it. If you're already trailing and it's the fourth quarter, yeah, that's a really bad time for that to happen.
Yeah, and they were down 20 at that point after another Darcy Byrne-Jones goal. And Byrne-Jones has kept his importance as a pressure forward. I really like the way that they've moved him around and enabled some of the younger pieces in the back. I still think they could use a bit more in terms of one more strong one-on-one option, especially if Radagalea is going to stay forward. Bergman can do a lot of the smaller end. Still not super confident in Brandon Zerk-Thatcher as a number 2 option. And Logan Evans hasn't developed the pure defensive instinct. That's really the one thing to look out for in terms of Port for this year and long term, I think. I also just lead this game wondering, where does Jordan Sweet's continued success leave Yvonne Soldo? Because Soldo is out of contract.
Are we talking like within this season? Is there any room for, I mean, is Soldo even going to get back in this year? I would think that considering just the timeline, it would be tough to get him back in there unless it's out of necessity. But I was just thinking, what about you stick Soldo forward and then make him the backup ruck and you can move Asaba back to the back?
Who'd you take out then?
I mean, from this week, Ryan Burton, although I guess, did he play more forward?
He did. I guess that was a bit more of a defensive assignment, especially because no Marshall, no Georgiadis.
I don't know. I got to think about this more.
And I'm thinking, take out of the 22 because obviously Quentin Narkle has just been the sub for a while now. So that's the real dilemma.
Francis Evans, by no fault of his own?
Frank had some good moments, especially in the first half. I wouldn't take him. I think that would also just leave you really tall.
Maybe, yeah, I think it would just be tough for Soldo to get a game as things currently stand, again, unless something was to happen to Jordan Sweet.
Unless something were to happen to Sweet or to another forward option. And also, longer term, when you got guys like Sam Powell-Pepper to factor into things again next year, I wonder how much interest Soldo will get from elsewhere. That would be a thread to follow, and I don't think one that's been talked about a bunch.
And as a player with, like, a lot of ways he could be deployed,
and with premiership credentials,
I'm not just interested in where he'll go. Staying is one of the possibilities, of course, but I'm interested in, like, how he would be deployed.
No matter what happens, we'll always have Lacumve.
St. Kilda 16-11-107, defeating Geelong 14-5-89. Fuck.
Wow.
So, yeah, again, thanks Collingwood, because otherwise top 4 would be in doubt. Instead, this is probably just going to cost the Cats being home that first week of finals. Most likely going to be at Sydney, which is not optimal, but
I mean, you've already set this team up to be a straight sets out, and I'm with you.
Just win a final. But first half was really good. Lawson Humphreys intercepted everything. Saints had a bunch of skill errors, including a ton from Nazaya Wanganeen-Miller, which is just unlike him.
That's a very not Nazaya. And then they just took some more time from the back, just carved them up more on the outside.
And they would just reverse to whichever side didn't really have a lot of guys. And Geelong never countered that. And whereas the tackling was actually great in the first half, second half, it wasn't so much getting tackles broken. It was not even laying them, just letting guys run around you. And it just looked like a lack of effort from a whole lot of the team, with the exception of like Patrick Dangerfield and Jack Bowes. Like the one long-term positive I got out of this game was that Jack Bowes actually played pretty well on the wing. And with Tanner Bruin presumably healthy this week and beyond, hopefully, that could actually have some staying power. Even though he's not very fast, I like Bowes on the outside. I thought he was the clear polished turd.
That's a difficulty there, a slower way. I feel like you could have him maybe a bit off the center square as an option to set up some overlaps, but maybe not a full-out way. That is a real interesting call there because Geelong are definitely trying to figure out that part of the ground. But I'm thinking like overlaps with guys like Brad Close to get Close more involved, and
Close needs to be involved more. I say that every week. It was definitely a case again this week.
And you look at when things needed to be won last week, Close had his moments. So we're just very much on the get Brad Close the ball train here. I'm impressed that the Saints were able to move on from the poor first half. One of the better games thus far for Darcy Wilson.
I thought he was spectacular. I don't care what his efficiency numbers were. I thought he played just a really great full 4 quarters. And then Cal Wilkie dominated the second half. And in part, that was just stupid entries by the Cats kicking towards him when in the first half, you targeted Dougal Howard and Josh Battle a lot, and it worked pretty much every time.
Did Wilkie really switch his approach, switch his matchups?
I didn't notice a ton of that. I think it was more like he would usually, instead of taking the one-on-one, be like that extra man in.
And if you're trying to kick more centrally, he'll get there more often than not. He's got to be in the All-Australian squad. Rowan Marshall's got to be in the All-Australian squad. I would actually put him at this point as maybe the number 2 ruck this year behind Tristan Jerry.
I'd still put Max Gawn. I think it's Gawn and Jerry. And I'd put Kieran Briggs above Marshall too.
What about Grundy? You're putting him behind those?
I'd put Grundy above Marshall as well. I like Marshall a lot more last year, but he was pretty good in this game, especially in the second half, where you'd see the difference in approach where Reece Stanley would wait right at the middle of the center circle, and then Marshall would crash in from starting out farther, running on in, and Reece played a really good first half, and then the second half, I think like that little honeymoon phase ended.
Marshall's good at figuring those things out mid-game, and he's got more of a full field impact than most other rucks. I would say more of a forward impact than maybe any other ruck at this point. I think that's also why.
It depends on how you view Luke Jackson.
Yeah, I'm talking like rucks in the All-Australian conversation and rucks who aren't really classified as ruck forwards. I think that's been such a big part of why the Saints have won 5 of their past 7 games and could really play spoiler and still have the opportunity to do that this coming week. At least make it happen.
But really, both teams, in some ways, kind of did the same thing to each other in their dominant halves. Have you ever, inflated a plastic bag, like a Ziploc bag, and then, poked little holes in it? Not to create, a big pop, but, left the air out very slowly?
Which can be really satisfying.
That's basically how each team attacked the other zone with, this series of short, uncontested kicks.
Just like death by 1,000 cuts sort of thing, especially in the second half, I can get that by.
Yeah, and it was just a series of short Saints kicks, and every time they had someone open, and it left the Cats defense looking really tired and scattered.
Well, the Saints have the pieces in terms of endurance to keep things more mobile, so I'm not really surprised by that.
It's annoying because it's it doesn't look like they're moving very quickly.
They're just moving effectively, and
He's always got the extra man.
That's just Ross Lyon, I think. Ross Ball works with uncontested play and keeping numbers around in case of a turnover. So that's just sound strategy that you ought to expect when playing the Saints. And because no other team really takes that approach, it always trips people up at some point, and it really did that in the second half. You've said, and I've agreed with you time and again, don't take your form against the Saints into consideration when it comes to your form against any other opponent.
The only one I'd even consider with that is possibly Frio, who still, achieve their objectives through pretty different means. But yeah, in this case, I'm very glad that that's the case, that what happens against the Saints doesn't really measure up much of anything else because they do their own thing.
Well, maybe that'll be an issue come next September. I think they are forming things pretty well in terms of their list, and the compensation for Josh Maddow will help with that also. But just a younger crop, with pieces like Wilson in there. Hugo Garcia with a good effort as a sub. Big rundown tackles, defining moment in some respects, and then went down and had an octopus in the VFL also. Ari Schoenmaker doing well in the twos. Just they're prepared.
Assuming Josh Battle does go to Hawthorn, I'm starting to think, like, I don't know how you incorporate both him and Tom Barris right now because things are going pretty well. And maybe that involves more forward time for like Blake Hardwick or something. But freeing up Sicily as well. Sicily definitely hasn't been the same one-on-one player. Also, you're going to have to... I would try to kick at Josh Battle because I think of him as a pretty good ball mover, but not a great actual one-on-one defender.
Also, you're going to have to move on from Sam Frost in a year or two, right? I think that's the other thing.
Hey, he's still got a lot in the tank for now. As much as I have joked about him in the past, this year, he's been pretty good. But yeah, I'm definitely much more optimistic about the Saints heading towards the end of the season, save for that. Like, the games that have been bad for them have been really bad, whether it's just been hard to watch or just getting their cheeks clapped like you had against the Lions.
Yeah, especially disheartening considering what they had done, just letting all hell break loose in the fourth quarter at the GABA, and then just to come out so flat at Marvel, and it's not just because it's Lions at Marvel.
I wish Lawson Humphreys had gotten more than 5 second-half disposals. I don't think that was so much his fault, but he had 19 at halftime and a bunch of intercepts. I think he got credited with 9 intercepts for the game, and I think almost all of them had to have been in the first half, if not literally all of them. I have to think at least 7 or 8 did.
Sunday was...
It was a very Sunday in terms of like what the AFL wanted. The middle game being the one with the 2 major clubs. There are 3 of the bottom 3 playing and none of them playing each other.
They all got their asses blasted and were reminded of why they were the bottom 3. Starting with the Western Bulldogs 2018-138 defeating North Melbourne 6-6-42. 4 goals, 7 to 1 point in the second quarter indicates how much the Bulldogs dominated, yet could have really blown this out. Instead, we still have only had just 2 games decided by triple digits this season.
This was a total ass kicking.
I thought a lot of this game was going to hinge on Rory Lobb in a ruck defender role, especially with the power that Nick Largy has, but when you couldn't consistently get entries into him, that wasn't nearly as much of a factor. I think at this point, we could just say, no Sheasel, no North. It's astonishing how much North have improved since Sheasel was let loose, and because he was out with an injured ankle, they just suffered all over the ground. They missed his contest work. They missed how polished he is. They just missed everything about him.
I watched the first quarter pretty closely and then napped during the second. And after seeing what had happened, decided, yeah, I'm not going to give this one a super close watch.
Yeah, you don't really need to. North have the ability to pressure. They can keep things pretty central, but just their skill errors let them down. A lot of kicking issues and unforced errors. So the Bulldogs got a lot of turnovers, a lot of uncontested possessions, and a lot of easy look at goal. That should really be no surprise. And when North don't have their reigning best and fairest and probably 2-time best and fairest to help sort things out and just be cleaner and get people going the right places, they won't be able to rebound from their errors nearly as well. There's really nothing shocking about this for North. And with Tim English out, it just meant North had a strong hit-out advantage. The Bulldogs actually didn't have a single hit-out to advantage in this game. That's only happened one other time this year. The difference, they still clapped North Melbourne's cheeks.
The other was the D's against Freo.
Yeah, no gone in that game against Darcy and Jackson, I think?
I believe so.
Yeah, just Tristan Jerry had a day out. He did everything he could and had more responsibility in terms of getting the ball in the right places from the middle, but he was 1 against 18 in a lot of respects. All of Bontempelli, Treloar, Liberatore, Richards were very active. And then Lobb and Sam Darcy held up enough in terms of positioning, maybe not getting the actual hitouts, but just setting up their teammates for some success. And then, yeah, Sam Darcy could go forward as well. That's really where he belongs. 7-1. His father never kicked 7. And he...
Now wait a minute.
Oh, wait, I should have said this a different way earlier.
I made a boo-boo, yeah.
Sam Darcy, 7-1-43, defeated North Melbourne 6-6-42.
He did
Yeah, that ain't great, North. He had fine marking last week, just couldn't convert. And then Jamar Ugle-Hagan had enough involvement as well. There was just everything checked out for the rising forward group for the Dogs in this game. It worked on the smaller end also. And Richards running through and getting a couple. Jack McRae came on as the sub and had numbers that a lot of people would envy for a full game, taking 2-1 from 17.
See, the optimists would look at their loss to the Crows and say it gave a way to get Jack McRae back in. I still think dropping Riley Garcia was really dumb after he had played one of the few positive roles in that loss to the Crows.
It was really just Garcia and then McNeil. You mentioned Lockie McNeil. Full game effort that he put on. And McNeil and Vandermeer were both solid again. They have both really taken a step up in the past 4 to 6 weeks, and the Dogs have largely gone up with them. It's that sort of second tier that we keep talking about, or maybe the third tier, where they had really been struggling, and the smaller side in particular. McNeil and Vandermeer have been clean kicks all over the ground, and this has been Vandermeer's best season for sure.
I picked Darcy to win the Rising Star Award in, I think it was 2022.
Well, he can't.
I know, but that prediction looks pretty good right now.
Yeah, he is looking like a top Propsect.
Explain.
I think he's probably the hottest Propsect in the game moving into 2025.
Who tweeted this? I see it's a quote from Matthew Lloyd. Was this tweeted by, the actual AFL page?
And I believe it's still there.
Well, clearly they didn't get roasted by enough people.
Sam Darcy, Propsect.
I think that's his nickname from now on, Propsect.
Again, good that he could get last week behind him. Good that Ugle-Hagan was able to shake off early misses in this game. And best game thus far for Joel Frazier, who probably would be second in terms of rising star this week.
I think he has to be. I don't know who else would be in consideration besides the guy who actually won it that we're going to talk about in just a minute.
Yeah, Frazier with 2 assists off his 29 disposals, 13 marks, 7 scored involvements. Got more involved in the middle and the forward half as the game went on. I think a lot of that was just from the Bulldogs having enough forward time. And with the group of Thomas, Jones, O'Donnell patrolling the back, yeah, give him that license. If he's proven this in one game, keep it going. See what he can do there against the Giants. If he's a good distributor from the back, you can use that forward. I'm thinking sort of in a Lockie Whitfield-like sense, but obviously Frazier is a good bit stockier. Hawthorn 19-17-131, defeating Richmond 10-8-68.
57-7 first quarter, highest scoring quarter for any team this season, not just first quarter, any. I can't find who it was who had tweeted it, and I feel bad because I like being able to credit people, but someone had said Richmond get the first goal and they give up the next 6 in a row. And not only did they give up the next 5 or 6 goals, it ended up being 9.
Number 9.
And it was like watching a high school football blowout in terms of the over by the end of the first quarterness, and nothing fancy or complicated about what they were doing. It was just go straight through the middle.
IMG versus Bishop Sycamore.
I don't think Richmond players were sharing helmets. Nick Watson did a Mikal Bridges celebration, and Mikal Bridges commented on it. I'm going to assume he knows very little about footy, seeing as he's a Philadelphia guy. He also, he claimed that he has eaten at Chipotle every day for 10 years, which I'm going to doubt, but I can see him doing it a lot. I do know that minor leaguer Marquise Grissom Jr. actually did 100 straight days of Chipotle. He had gotten to 40-something and then was just you know what, let's stretch this out to an even 100.
The son of the former Brave and Giant?
And other teams. But yeah, athletes, especially minor league baseball players, fucking love Chipotle.
And when athletes also just get into routines in terms of food and stuff, athletes are so often ridiculously superstitious, so it's no surprise that they stick with it. Especially if it works. I don't think anybody's going to be on Wade Boggs level, but yeah, basically, as for the actual football, Hawthorn just went straight through the middle, and it just went goal, 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 goal. Jai Newcomb started everything. Dylan Moore was very involved in the forward 50. Massimo D'Ambrosio did stuff down the lines and actually got a couple clearances himself. Both Cam McKenzie and Connor McDonald were good. I know there was a concussion scare with McKenzie, so glad that wasn't the case. I've really liked McKenzie as he's developed over these past 2 years now, and he will just continue to get more opportunities, of course.
If going off for the evaluation stuff hadn't killed his momentum, I think he would have been in some consideration for votes. There is one big injury out of the game. Will Day, with not a broken, but partially dislocated collarbone from kind of friendly fire, kind of just collided with Jai Newcomb and came off like holding his shoulder right away.
Yeah, that's kind of a big deal.
Considering how poorly this team played without him, like, I wouldn't expect they'd lose to North without him. But if he was to miss a final, because he's been ruled out of this coming week, if he was to miss a final, I would give them the lowest odds of any of the 8 of winning the flag.
Well, we just haven't seen a dayless Hawthorn since they started their rise, and obviously some of that is causation rather than pure correlation. But the team as a whole has found their footing, and I think some players would be able to help fill the gaps better than others. It's just Day's utility makes replacing him very difficult. I know Jack Scrimshaw is going to be rested this next week as well. I think there was concern with his finger. Hawthorn should have no problem. They're playing North, and it's in their hands. Props to them. I'm not surprised by really any of this, but I still contend they should not have played Day and should not have played Sicily. You don't lose if you don't have either of those in. I was happy that Richmond did fight through things. They did play much more competitively in the middle quarters in particular.
This game didn't change my opinion about many things regarding Hawthorn. The only thing that really stood out to me that I hadn't considered before was that, a couple weeks ago in the Collingwood blowout, I thought like Jai Newcomb deserved a ton of credit, even though his effectiveness fell off because he started everything in the middle. He did it throughout the full game, and the final stat line illustrates that with the 15 score involvements out of 33 disposals, 9 clearances, 7 marks, 6 score launches, a goal, a behind, 2 assists.
That indicates constant involvement and very, very, very little opposition.
Also, just it's funny that, at one point this year, it was like Blake Hardwick got pushed forward and kicked a bunch of goals. This game, he had 11 intercepts.
Yeah, well, as Sicily's fallen off defensively, Hardwick's had more of that back half responsibility. So that doesn't really surprise me. We know what he's capable of, and the answer is a lot.
As someone who hasn't watched Richmond super closely for a bunch of this year, because most of their games that you've been in charge of have not been close enough for me to go back and watch, I actually did take a few things away. Jacob Bauer is a really quality contested mark, plays bigger than he is.
I saw that last week as well, and I was just sad that he hadn't gotten more of an opportunity this year. He's had to work through a lot of injuries, but thought he could have been brought up from the twos a couple weeks earlier. Constantly willing himself into contests, knows how to just go back and anticipate the flight of the ball really well.
Jacob Blight, I thought there was an obvious skill gap and an obvious gap in experience with the assignments he had, but he worked his ass off and did everything he could to compensate for that, and still got beat a few times, but you gotta respect the hustle, and that's the sort of guys you'd be very proud to bring on as a mid-season draftee, and someone you want in the fold long term, I would hope.
Maybe with a number other than 51.
Things were less positive for Richmond. Ben Miller, who I've normally liked, had a rough game, as did James Precise, and just a mostly healthy midfield. For all the other injuries that this team has, a mostly healthy midfield getting crushed like that does not give you a lot of encouragement for the long-term outlook. Oh, the other feel-good thing about this game, certainly. Nick Vostone did all he could in the back. I thought this was one of his better games going back towards the first few weeks of the year. He was on fire and then he kind of fell off. He's finishing the year much stronger. Dion Prestia was easily their best midfielder, had 7 clearances. I would put him in consideration for the polished turd, but I think my polished turd pick is Hugo Ralphsmith.
How much bias is there?
Only slight, because he kicked a goal, 17 disposals, but he used his speed and impacted the game in both 50s. I think that's pretty impressive.
I'm glad that they moved him around to allow him that impact in both 50s as well. Some of it obviously is just his instinct in terms of following the play, but also Uze saying, yeah, go and do that.
My favorite Hawthorn thing, though, was that Jack Gunston kicked 5. And, earlier this year looked so completely finished. Could this be his final season? Possibly. I would be shocked if he played beyond next year. But that he's shown, hey, I'm still here, I can still contribute, is pretty awesome. That's now 12 goals in his last 3 games. Would I expect a run like that to keep up? No, but it's very encouraging. And, some of that also comes off of the presence of Rising Star nominee Cal Sherdeer, who, even if he isn't taking a ton of marks himself, that someone's going to crumb off of his mark, every time.
And Deer also kicked 3-1 this game, so he brought in enough as well as just contesting a bunch. And I love how many Hawthorn players are willing to contest like that.
Here's the tough thing matching up with Deer. That someone else is going to come in and get it if he doesn't mark it. But if you don't pay enough attention to him, he's just going to mark him himself. So it's kind of like, what do you do there?
And this is how we're speaking about him when he just turned 19.
Oh, here go hell come.
Richmond, as bad as the first quarter was, I liked the way they played the rest of the game. They always did just enough to make sure that they didn't really have a shot. Noah Malta, if he had kicked the goal after the halftime siren, to get it down to 32 instead of 37, I feel like that would have been big. A couple of dumb 50s and stuff. You never want to be a fan of a team that's down 50 after a quarter. But the effort Richmond showed the remainder of the game was good. And you look back to the Brisbane loss and how that did not happen. There are some signs here. I'm concerned about the midfield.
How about signs for the Blues? 6 changes, including 2 debutants. They both scored their first goals, and they were both damn good. One of them was particularly special, that being Ashton Moyers in the fourth quarter, a true volley, as they got the job done with ease out west. Eagles 4-10-34 defeated by the Blues 14-15-99. The Blues held the Eagles scoreless in the second quarter, and really, from the midpoint of the second quarter, nobody should have had any hope if they were wearing blue and gold in the stands or anywhere. West Coast can bring strong pressure from the start, but they simply weren't clean enough, and it felt like that at the start of each half, and the class of Patrick Cripps showed through in this game. Seems like an easy 3 votes for him. George Hewitt and Matt Kennedy with big contributions. Also Hewitt with more of the volume and Kennedy getting some forward time. And remember, everybody had to pitch in up forward this game, and it was a much smaller look for the Blues, which I think actually played into their hands really nicely because it's a taller back line for West Coast, even with no Barris there. McGovern and Harry Edwards attracting the most attention. There's only so much that Brady Hoff can do, and you would need 3 or 4 of him to be able to counter everything that was coming at him in this game. Matthew always super active, getting the ball into good spots and kicking 3 goals himself. And also on the tall end, McGovern was kept out of things a lot by Brody Kemp. Well done to my sleeper pick. Came into this game with 2 goals, kicked 4.
Pretty cool for Brody Kemp, considering that he has not been a solution defensively, and I think there's a good chance if it wasn't for all those injuries, he would have gotten dropped. But I'm just disappointed that the Eagles didn't keep this interesting because I had no reason to even watch this after the Richmond-Hawthorn game ended. And it really takes out the question of anything percentage-wise that could determine if someone makes the 8.
No, it's simple. Blues winning it.
It could still, percentage could determine the order between Carlton and Hawthorn, but it's disappointing. There was a chance here to do something really cool, and the Eagles didn't do that.
A chance to honor J.B. Cripps at his 250th, a chance to send off Andrew Gaff properly. Wasn't a huge fan of Gaff's game, but you knew he would get it. Nice of the club to get him a last game and get a life membership while at it. That's pretty cool. I can't knock the club for that. I can knock them for pretty much everything else and say that this is the type of game that could cost Jared Schofield a permanent job because there was just no lasting solution anywhere. This is a team that could bring numbers into the middle and get out front enough, and it wasn't happening. Nobody was matching up on Cripps properly. He was given too much license, firstly, and then they tried to put Zane True on him. It felt like True was a scapegoat here, and if he gets fucking D-list, I'm going to be livid.
Having now gone back and watched the win over North, I see what you see in Zane True. Good pressure, good on-ball skills, quality midfielder, tough assignment for him, but I actually kind of like the idea of giving him a shot there. Like, hey, kid, let's see what you can do.
I'm just concerned that he hasn't been given a new contract yet. Harry Edwards got one. Very happy about that, and he was tested a lot and was regularly good. I mean, that's not a surprise to me. I've been advocating for Edwards for a while as well. The midfield, though, they tackled what they could. They pressured what they could. Harley Reid and Elliot Yeo did stay at it, and Reid definitely tried to energize with a couple don't argues and runs, but the resistance was futile.
I have very little to say about this game, so I will talk about this instead. You know that joke where, like, the optimist and the pessimist? You know, like, glass half full, glass half empty. This is piss. Well, some people think of Hawthorne's colors as piss and shit. And as a rival, I like to think of that as well. But when I look at that, you know what I think of when I see those colors? Mac and cheese with some pulled pork or brisket. And I do maintain, though, that Hawthorne versus Richmond is not a good color clash.
Just the different yellows or golds clashing and the brown versus black. I think
It does not work.
you see, this is why every club needs
A white alternate. You also have to convince the big Victorian clubs that they should ever change out of their regular colors, which a lot of them are like too big to do.
Well, it looks like Essendon might actually relax some stuff in terms of their clash jumper and actually have a full black sash next year. So that's a plus. And Richmond, you can do stuff with like a yellow and black stripe.
Well, I used to just love that full body tiger thing that Richmond has used in the preseason sometimes. Like, I want that to be more of a thing.
Make a white version of that as a clash.
Or just that in general.
It could work. Do want to mention also in terms of Carlton, this was a better game in the ruck, more polished for Mark Pitnet, and that's a necessity with Tom DeConing still on the med.
But he mostly just going up against Bailey Williams.
Yeah, I was, and, you know, it's a decent matchup for Bailey, but
What I liked about Bailey Williams watching the Tristan Jerry matchup a week earlier, he knew he was going to get his ass kicked, but just took it like, I'm going to do everything I can to make your life as difficult as possible and just annoy you as much as I can. And maybe that means he gives up like 1,000 free kicks. But I liked his mentality and his approach.
Eagles actually did have more hitouts than the Blues in this game. It was just quality of hitouts that favored Pitnet and Carlton. 9 of his 32 hitouts, Pitnets, were to advantage. I'm also just really dissatisfied with the fact that Jack Williams was subbed out when he was putting up a good fight in there and bringing it at the ground as well. 4 hitouts to advantage and 6 tackles for Jack, and they subbed him out. I did not get that at all. By the way, this game was a bitch to notate.
You had multiple Cripps, multiple Williams, multiple McGoverns,
Multiple Hollands.
Jeez. Yeah, that would be a lot to deal with.
Yeah, so 2 Cripps, Jamie and Patrick. I think noted that it was C. Durden because there are 2 Durdens on Carlton. 2 Hollands, Elijah and Ollie, of course. They've been working really well. I think Ollie had a more solid game as a whole this time around. And Elijah, we know what his impact has been. 2 McGoverns and 3 Williams. And yeah, I'm complimentary of how Carlton handled the forward mix and how they just leaned into the smaller side of things against a taller Eagles lineup. I wish Ashton Moyer had gotten the full game. I don't like subs on debut, and I think it still would have been good to have another taller player in there the whole way.
Who would you have made the sub instead?
Alex Chinkata again. Or Jack Carroll, although Carroll was playing back home.
Did Chinkata do any tagging in this game?
Nothing crazy.
All right, nominee time?
It is nominee time as we are in the penultimate round of the home and away season. This has gone by quickly.
Again, as I was saying during the previous show, I remember when I was still breastfeeding this season. And that Drummond latching.
Your round 22 mark of the week was Harley Reid over Aiden Core. That was a quality climb from Harley. This week's nominees, all from Sunday. 1 from each game. Ty Simpkin took one over Tom Liberatore. Noah Balsa got a knee to Lloyd Meeks back. And Brody Kemp, before kicking his 4th goal, leapt in between Alex Witherden and Mark Pitnet. All quality marks. Really happy again with what Kemp did forward, as I had him as my sleeper pick. But Simpkins was one of the cleanest hangers of the year.
You can rank these in the order they happen. Simpkin, Balta, Kemp.
I'm honestly not sure. I just like Kemp's timing and entry there and kind of taking it at the apex. But Simpkin's the clear winner.
Goal of the week. Last week was Josh Weddle. He picked up a bad Jesse Mouthlop handball and immediately kicked. It should have been Brian. Your round 23 nominees are Nick Dacos, who received a John Noble handball, outran Lockie Neal and Dara Joyce, probably ran about 20 to 23 meters the first time. I would say 22 to 23. Then bounced and then ran another 7 or 8 meters and bounced again, and then kicked with his right. He had Lockie Schultz receiving a John Noble kick that deflected but didn't change path off of Dane Zorko. Then he handballed to Jamie Elliott, got a handball back and kicked from the right pocket, cutting the lead to 5. And finally, you have Ashton Moyer redirecting Patrick Cripps' kick for his first career goal. If this was done with a soccer ball, happens all the time. You do this with a Sharon, way, way cooler.
And we've seen a couple goals like these over the past few years get robbed sometimes even of goal of the week consideration.
I think the Charlie Cameron one was goal of the week.
I mean, that's more of a toe tap. I'm thinking the Eddie Betts volley, Toby Nankervis knocking one down to himself. Those have been pretty straight kicks, though. This one was more on an angle, and it felt like an actual soccer play. So Ashton Moyer, well fucking done.
That's your winner. I think I would rank these Moyer, then Dacos, then Schultz.
I wonder if Moyer will have an easier time winning because the Collingwood vote will be split. If so, that will be just. Last week's main character was obvious. It was Mac Andrew, because after the siren, everything else about that involved in the...
I was the main character of that game beginning at the end of the first half, and he remained the main character through the end of the game, and then became the main character of the entire round.
This week, the main character didn't strike, actually quite literally, until the third quarter of his game, but he's remained the main character since. It's Dan Houston.
I think you can still make a case for Joe Danaher.
I was thinking that because the magnitude of that game and just it being such a Joe Danaher game, as I've said frequently. But nah, I think it's Houston in terms of the impact on that game and the subsequent attention in terms of the media and factoring in potential trade talk with him as well and how it impacts finals. I think Dan Houston's a pretty good winner here. I don't think this requires a vote this time.
Yeah, I guess so.
We are done here then, and we'll be talking to you again soon to preview the closing round, a closing round with no direct overlaps.
Now on the Saturday, there are some staggered games.
Yeah, but nothing starting right at the same time, and a fully spaced out Sunday, which has its pros and has its cons.
The only con is that there's a chance only one team is really playing for anything in the final game. Hopefully that's not the case.
Port will at least be playing for a home qualifier. As always, you can find me at BenjaminHK01 on Twitter. My brother is at Castle Media. The executive producer is on Instagram at Cat Named Grind, and he is sleeping now. We'll see how long that lasts. We are on a bunch of socials at Americans Footy. Stay on the lookout for polished turd updates and the like, and good time of day.